What's going on, guys? It is Sam, and what we're going to be diving into is a new type of video for my channel. Basically, I'm here with my good friend Josh.
Hello.
He's a photographer. We'll get into that soon, but basically this is just like an informal way to review or talk about different things in the camera and tech world. Well, basically just anything going on in life that we find interesting to talk about. But today, basically what we're going to be discussing is the new Panasonic S1 that we got to shoot on the other day. So basically, Josh is a fashion photographer, many other things as well. Fashion's probably the big one.
Yeah.
I'm
a man of many talents, but yeah, fashion photography is my favorite, sure.
It's really the favorite? There's nothing else you prefer that you're talented at?
Nah, let's leave it at that.
Okay. So basically, I just met Josh on the first fashion commercial I ever worked on, and we've been good friends ever since. So yeah, do you want to just quickly...
Yeah, sure. So I'm Josh Ridgway from Ridgey Designs, which is my business that I have. I've been a photographer for, I think it's around about 12 years now. So yeah, and as Sam said, I met him on a set of a fashion shoot. The regular videographer couldn't attend, and
I snaked on in there.
Snaked on in a little 16, 17-year-old Samfregonese to come and do the video.
So like a couple of weeks ago? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've known Sam for quite a while. We've done a lot of shoots together, whether they be like corporate shoots, fashion shoots, even just mucking around. Whenever we get new cameras, we hang out and nerd out to cameras. Yeah,
so basically that's why I thought it was good to sit down together and we can nerd out of the new Panasonic specs, and because we both shot with it, it would be awesome just to say our thoughts and basically an informal review of all about it, what kind of specs it's got, what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, how it performed, and just basically go through that. So I thought we would just talk about what cameras we've owned so people know that we have been through a lot of cameras and we know what we want to look for in a new camera.
Yeah.
It's not like we just have owned one camera our whole life or one system.
Yeah.
We've definitely had our fair share of camera hopping. So do you want to just go through?
Yeah, sure. So for myself, I was probably shooting Canon for around about 10 years. I started with a 40D, I think it was, back in the day. Before that, I had some old Panasonic that I thought was an SLR, but it was really just like a point and shoot with a zoom lens. But when you're like 14 years old, you think those kind of strange things. After that, I was shooting a lot of action sports. So for me, the next progression was to a 7D to have just that you know fast kind of frame rate. After that, I moved into 5D. So started with the 5D Mark II.
The golden days.
Strangely enough, we've got one sitting here in front of me because I've gone full circle and I have them again. And that was my start into full frame.
Yeah.
When I got into full frame, I didn't know why it was better. I was just told it was better and my photos will be better with full frame. And since through all this time, I've learned that that's not exactly the truth to the matter. Sure, it's a factor.
But are you excited that the Panasonic is full frame?
I'm excited that it's full frame, yeah.
Cool. But you got to work with what you got.
Yeah. So another player in the market that's full frame for me, I think is a great thing. So after I moved, I didn't move. I bought a Fuji. I bought an XT1.
Yeah, you were the original Fuji gang. You got half of my friends onto Fuji.
Yeah.
Unknowingly. So we shot a wedding together, me and Josh. Josh was helping out. Normally a photographer was like, yeah, okay, I'll give video a go.
Yeah.
Came out and obviously knows camera settings, knows how to use a camera, and then just helped me out on this wedding job. But I used the Fuji on that, and I was going for it more than the 1DX on the wedding day. I was like, oh, bro, can I take that again?
Yeah. Well, we had that on a crane.
On the gimbal, because I barely use gimbal, so it was good to have that on that. And then after that, I showed a couple of friends, and then they got on board with the XT2. I didn't even jump on it. I wanted to, but I never made the swap.
Yeah.
But a couple of my friends did, and now they all just swapped to the XT3. So hopefully they don't regret that with this new Panasonic, but we'll see. Yeah,
so my move to the XT1 was just to have another little camera on the side that was light, small and compact while I was still shooting my 5Ds at the time. And then I was like, well, wait a second, I'm actually enjoying using this camera, first of all. And second of all, it's getting me good results. So then I did a full switch over to Fuji. So I sold all my Canon gear, had an XT1, then I got the XT2, I had the 56 and the 90 and the 23, and I had all of the
35 that rolled down the hill on the wedding shoot.
That was actually my 56. So, but yeah, I had the 35 as well. So I had all of Fuji's good lenses, and for a time frame there, it was a good time. I was really enjoying it. I didn't really think I was missing out on much.
Colors were good.
Colors were amazing. Sharp. I did this crazy thing where the first time in the 10 years of shooting, I actually started shooting JPEGs only for my non-commercial stuff. Yeah. So if I was going
straight out of the camera,
I was going out walking the streets with a girl and we're doing some street photography, that kind of thing, street fashion, I'd just shoot in JPEG because it was easy and they loved what the results were coming straight off the camera.
Yeah, and it's gone to social media, and they're gonna zoom in. Ooh, what's the focus like?
Yeah.
It's like,
well, the great thing with that was and it was my first.
Oh, and it was that one, the smartphone one? You could just
so it was my first camera that I had that you could also Wi-Fi straight to your phone as well, the image. So I was able to, while be actually on the shoot, to start posting the shoot edited. So have a little play with the photos.
Almost live.
Yeah, almost being able to show the shoots happening live. So that's what got me started into mirrorless. From there, I had a little bit of the A7 III got announced, and I got really hyped for that autofocus system. IAF sounds like the best thing in the world to me. So I moved to Sony away from the Fuji, and strangely enough, with my Sony, I'm actually shooting 90% Canon lenses using the Sigma MC11 adapter. The Sony thing we'll talk about later in comparison to the Panasonic.
Yeah, because when we were shooting, Josh had the Sony on the shoot, and we basically just did some comparisons as well.
Yeah. So we're shooting them side by side. There's some things about the Sony that I'll mention in that comparison where I'm not actually happy being a Sony shooter. Sure, I don't
think anyone's happy being a Sony shooter.
The actual final results are great coming out of the camera. The colors do need a little bit of working, but it's more about the actual device itself that I have the biggest problems with. So that's where I am now, progressing all the way from Canon. As I said, now I've got Sony's. I bought a 5D Mark II just to get that nostalgia shooting that I really love.
And I guess if we play with the Panasonics a bit more, we'll see if we...
we're trying to get our hands on that Panasonic love that we have.
So we'll see what happens there. I've had a pretty similar amount of cameras.
You're worse. You're worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the smartest business-wise, or it could be. I mean, tax write-off, you could... It's depends how you view it, but it keeps me happy.
You live and you learn, basically.
It does keep me happy. Basically, I started with the 600D on that first shoot where we met, actually. I was rocking the 600D. And
you got some good stuff.
Yeah, it came out nice.
Stuff, lit
it nicely, came out good. From there, the GH4 came out, and that's kind of what blew my channel up. The GH4 videos, they're the ones that started getting views. Obviously, everyone loves the cost to what you actually get with it, and I think that's another thing with this S1, where it's like it's not too expensive for what you get. Like, there's not many other cameras that have the what's the word I'm looking for?
The whole package, basically.
The price for what you get.
Yeah, the bang for buck kind of thing.
That's the phrase I was looking for.
The
bang for buck. So super awesome. From the GH4, I needed a full wedding kit, needed something good in low light, wanted full frame, so I went to the original A7S. Hated the colors. I despise Sony. Obviously, raw photos, you can work a lot, but I shot a bit of S-Log.
Yeah, and I always remember when you got that A7S because you took it to Mount Kufa and did a low light test out there. Yeah. Basically shooting in pitch black with a girl that just had a mobile phone as the only bit of light. And it was amazing. I'll give him that. But at the time I was so heavily into Canon. I was like, that's a nice little toy you've got yourself there. But
well, eventually serious. I came around. I feel like whatever you say is almost gospel at this point. I just listen. I'm like, oh, what do you think? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I trust it. I ditched the Sonys and went back to the 5D3s, or two 5D3s and had the 5D2. Love the back of that screen.
Yeah.
Really nice to use. Obviously, the 12-minute record limit was not good for video. So eventually, the Red Raven came out and I upgraded to that. And
How did that go for you?
2 months later, I put a YouTube video up why I'm selling my Red Raven. And then about a year later, I upgraded to the Red Epic W with the 1DX in between. So we're actually shooting this on the Red Epic just in 1080p just to record continuous.
A little bit of overkill for a podcast, let me just say, but yeah, amazing.
We just need
amazing camera.
No, we just need the continuous record. I'd much prefer to shoot this on the Fuji.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously just picked up the XT3 now. This little toy right here, just as the B cam to the Red, but obviously wanting the best B cam for the Red I want because you need a powerful camera to keep up with that thing. Pretty impressed with what the Fuji is now, but with what we've done with the new Panasonic, I'm thinking I might ditch this and move on, but we'll have a look because I've also played with the Blackmagic recently. I've also played with what else have I played with lately? Oh, it was just the XT3, the Panasonic, and the Blackmagic. And
you also took my A7 III for a run as well.
Never really a contender.
Yeah,
the contenders were the XT3, the Blackmagic, or now this new Panasonic.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm kind of just deciding on which I think is the best B cam. And obviously, I want a couple of bodies for weddings, so probably 2 of these and then the Red. So I kind of just need to figure out budget-wise what's the best to invest. And obviously, this with Fuji lenses or the Panasonic with Canon lenses, we'll kind of see what the go is. But I'm really impressed with the Panasonic so far. So if you don't know about it, we'll just give you a quick rundown of the specs-wise. Do you want to just give them what the photo has?
So from photo side, I've got my spec list here.
Off the top of my head for the video, 4K 60p at a 1.5 times crop. You got full frame 4K at like 30 or under, whatever flavor you want, 24, 25, 30. They're all 150 megabits a second, or up to 150 megabits a second, all 420 8-bit color. There is a new firmware with Vlog, the pack that you can buy. It'll have 10-bit, but it didn't come with firmware 1.0, which is what we were rocking for the time we had the camera.
So from the photo side, we've got a 24.2 megapixel sensor with 5-axis dual IS. So that's both the camera body and the lens itself can do the IS. That delivers up to 6 stops of compensation, which we actually witnessed. Firsthand with the video, which was pretty cool. The viewfinder is one of the highest resolution viewfinders in a mirrorless, and it is something that I actually notice quite vividly, especially using the A7 III as my daily. Looking into that EVF is really good. The EVF has a refresh rate of 120 frames a second. The rear screen is a 3.2 inch 2100K dot RGBW screen. And something that is funny when you talk to Canon tutors, it has 2 card slots, which is a big thing.
But one's the
So one is a SD and one's XQD.
Yeah.
And the XQD one can be upgraded to CF Express later as well. So that's a big upgrade. One of the things that I want to talk about is the battery as well.
Oh, yeah. That's
so the battery is actually gigantic.
Yeah, big 3,000 milliamps.
Yeah, so 3,050 milliamps.
We lasted just off the one for half a day shooting between us both, photo and video.
Yeah.
And we were putting it through its paces.
Yeah.
Another thing that I forgot for the video wise, in 1080p, you can go up to 180 frames a second.
Yeah.
And you said the FPS before. I was like, I forgot the video FPS. So
it's 180,
Yeah, it'll be good to test that out.
So I think I shot over 1,000 photos. You did
20 gigs of footage.
20 gigs of footage, and we were still half a battery.
Yeah.
By the end.
That's awesome.
So
I had a lot more footage, but on the timeline that I cut up, I had like 6 minutes of footage that I could have used in that edit, which ended up being like 2 minutes long. So cut it up, culled it up. Came out pretty nice.
So I guess if we will get deep into the camera itself, we'll talk about the actual video experience that you had for shooting the videos. So how does it compare to a Red?
I mean, it's got a lot of features that I wish the Red had.
Yeah.
So the Red is obviously meant to be built up and on these big rigs, and it's a Hollywood camera.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a run and gun camera that's meant to have every little spec to help increase it. It's already good.
Yeah.
It's like the Panasonic has all these things to help increase your production value, being that small one-man band. So the ibis for me was nuts. I could hand hold it and walk with it, and it looked like I was on a gimbal or a glide cam. All those walking shots in that film, you saw firsthand. Like they were just me walking backwards.
Yeah, and
obviously I was walking with my knees crouched, and I was trying to keep it as steady as possible. But
it was still a decent pace.
The sensor and the lens, like we were on the 24-105 f4 IS.
Yeah,
I was walking pretty quickly, and it came out beautifully. All the ones that I was just kind of swaying with were fine straight out the camera. The walking ones, I added about 2% warp stabilizer in post, and done.
As I said, those ones that we needed to add a bit of warp stabilizer, you were actually going either tracking backwards or forwards with a bit of pace. So it's actually pretty amazing.
I didn't get any of the warps in the corners, which you get sometimes. Like it was rock solid enough that warp stable, it just added that little bit of
finesse.
Yeah. What else was really obviously the 4K 60p. That's the main feature of the camera that all the videographers are wanting to know about.
So, as a question, does that crop?
It does.
Yes.
1.5 times crop. But what's so good about it in comparison to other cameras that do it? Like obviously the 1DX does it. That was the first big brand camera that was like, it's bringing 4K 60 to the masses. Yeah, it does, but 15 minutes per 128 gigabytes. It's definitely not for the masses.
Yeah.
Who's got hard drives for that? Who's got enough CF cards for that? Or CFast cards for that? It was not ideal at all. Whereas this shot 4K 60p the whole day, all afternoon, 20 gigabytes. Done. 150 megabits a second. Perfect. Beautiful. So easy to edit. I edited in full resolution in Premiere. On the 1DX, I used to have to render out proxies because Motion JPEG was just nuts. And then on this camera you can also pick what kind of file wrapper you want. If you want MP4, if you want AVCHD, if you want, I think it was .mov, it was the other one, but you can pick what flavor of wrapper container you want.
And at the end of that, we were actually surprised with how much space we actually had left on the card itself. We thought we were going to fill a 128 if we shot at 4K 60 all day, plus me shooting photos on the one card. But we were fine.
We were under half.
And
it was maybe 50 gig for both of us.
And the resulting files that you're getting out of it were really good, really
super
sharp,
manageable, really sharp.
And because we shot in Cine V as well, they almost look finished straight out of the camera.
Cine V, obviously, is what we picked. We turned sharpening all the way down. We turned noise reduction all the way down. Obviously, we did a bit of grading in post. But you could definitely give a client that image straight out of camera. Cine D is obviously their flatter profile. Vlog's obviously the flattest. It's their log profile. Out of Cine V and Cine D, the D's a bit more flat. The V's got a bit more contrast, and we obviously liked a bit more contrast. I think me and you both like shooting
a little bit punchier.
We like shooting for the look out of the camera.
We
want it looking nice. Like, so if you wanted to show someone, it's like
good,
it's pretty well lit.
I feel like that we're both at that stage of our careers, in our respective careers, that we want to get it right in the camera, and have as little work as possible once we actually get home.
And we know we nail the exposure. We know we nail all of those settings in camera. We don't have to try and get as much leeway in post to bring it back to looking good. We nail it. It's done.
So we just put on a converted LUT onto that.
Josh actually made some LUTs for Lightroom, and I was editing it, looking at some different kind of LUTs that I've used in the past, and Josh was like, "Oh, you should just chuck on this one." And I was like, "Oh, I know how to convert it from Photoshop, but not Lightroom." And then
Lightroom,
Josh just did a quick Google and somehow
converted it into a cube, and we whacked it on, and we're like, "Okay."
Done. And we got the photo right up next to it, and we're like, this is a complete set. This is nuts. This is awesome.
With that, my LUT that you have to put on, you have to tone it down a little bit. But we were able to, just through exposures and
basically you put
contrast.
the LUT on over the top on a big adjustment layer, and then below that you just tweak each individual clip. If it's a bit underexposed, bring it up. If your white balance is a bit off, just tweak it how you want. It's pretty easy. Most of the clips didn't need too much.
So that the one thing that you did touch on there was talking about underexposure. So we did witness the 1S underexposing, the S1, sorry. Underexposing quite a bit.
That was mainly more of an issue for you.
Because
you were exposure comping, right?
So I was using exposure comp positive 1 just to get it to the brightness that I think it should have been at.
Yeah.
And we were using evaluative metering, so I don't know if it's something in this early software that we had, but I think that the metering was a little bit off for me anyway.
Yeah.
In particular, and you were finding when you were shooting manual, what you would think would be right, you had to go a little bit brighter again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially just for post-production, I kind of tend to just brighten it up a little bit because you can always bring those shadows back down. I'm not too concerned if the highlights blow out a little bit. It's part of the look. Because we shoot everything backlit mainly anyway. That's kind of our signature.
Yeah, so do you have much to say about the actual file dynamic? Like
how much in post you could push it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously shooting CineV, we don't need to push it too much in post. It looks how it is. But, I mean...
There's definitely the headway there to do it,
I mean,
right?
on the YouTube comments that we were getting, people were like, whoa, it's 8-bit color space. It's 420. How did you push it that much? And how did you bring that much detail? Like, honestly, we didn't do too much in post. No. There were a couple of shots where I masked out the sky and brought them down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I could bring that back super easily. I was super impressed.
That was really just you being nitpicky, if anything, because you could have left it and no one would have noticed.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to make it look as good as I could.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely have seen that there is, even in the one annoying thing with using the camera at the point that we had it was the fact that we couldn't shoot in, well, I couldn't shoot in RAW, so I had to shoot in
1.0.
Yeah, I had to shoot in JPEGs because we couldn't actually open RAWs at this stage.
So Josh was basically editing the photo version of the same file.
Yeah, so I'm shooting in the CineV picture profile, which is also doing the same coloring to the JPEGs themselves, and I was really happy with what I could do with those JPEGs. So through this podcast, we'll put up some examples of the shots, the before and after, showing the finished files. But yeah, I was pretty...
Do you want to talk about some of the stuff you were doing to the
images? Yeah. Okay, so with the actual files themselves, like Sam said, we shoot generally in the camera to them being good straight out of the camera, so there's little to do.
Because that comes from when you were shooting Fuji and you would just send it straight to your phone, put it up on Instagram, send it to the model, get her to put it up. Like, if you were shooting for like, oh, in post-production I'll do this and this, no way you would have been able to do that live with the model or whatever. So I think that's kind of when you started. Even with the Canon before that, I guess you were pretty well the same, but I think the Fuji kind of...
I think back in the day you used to shoot in RAW with the idea that I could, even if I don't get it right now, I'll be able to push it a little bit into Photoshop and get it right, where now I'm just a little bit more precise with that, where I want it to be right straight in the camera, so I don't have to
precise or lazy, because it depends how you look at it. You're like, oh, I don't want to do any post-production.
Yeah, look, it's the same either way you slice it. So for me, but yeah, getting back onto the Panasonic files, I was surprised with how good the files were. There were those few that were underexposed before we actually understood what the camera was doing and why that was happening, and I was able to bring them straight up. So through the whole day, other than a few missed focused photos, because I was shooting in continuous autofocus most of the day, there's none that I lost purely because the exposure was wrong or anything like that. So yeah, I was pretty happy with how the files hold up. Yeah.
While you're talking about focus just then, do you want to just continue on about a bit of tech about the focus? And
yeah, so this is a very contentious point on the Panasonic, because when it was released, they were stepping through I watched the release of the camera, and
the internet just went crazy.
Yeah, they were talking about all the specs, so everyone was hyped that it was full frame, that kind of thing. And the SL mount alliance, so you're going to be able to use Leica lenses on it straight away, and the fact that Sigma was also in there, so all the Sigma art lenses were coming to it.
You know, you can actually say, if you own any type of Sigma lens, any type of mount, if you have Sony mount, if you have Canon mount, you can send them into Sigma and they change them out for you. I don't know costing or anything so like I know that, but if you have a set, send them in.
There's definitely a service for that in America. I'm pretty sure that there is something similar here as well. So yeah, being able to change over your art lenses to a different mount would be great. Then they got further down the spec list and they listed that it was going to have their phase... no, actually, it wasn't going to have a phase detect autofocus. So it was going to have a contrast-based depth by defocus focusing system. So everyone was straight away really concerned with that, because all of your main players that you have in the mirrorless market in full frame are all phase detect based, or hybrid. So they're a mixture of both.
In your experience, what's the best out of them?
Phase
the
detect,
hybrid, or just
well,
pure phase?
just even with the hybrids, they mainly use phase detect until they can't use phase detect, and they'll drop back to contrast if they can't get it from phase.
It's basically the standard.
It's basically the standard. So what Panasonic have done here is they've brought over their system that they had in their Micro Four Thirds cameras. They've optimized them for working with full frame, because full frame has greater depth of field, so it actually has to do that depth by defocus. I think it's doing 480 cycles per second calculating autofocus, which is pretty crazy. But I think the great thing about the sensor for me is the fact that it doesn't have an aliasing filter. So like my Fuji's, it's sharp. And not having a phase detect array over the sensor means you're not going to get those little issues that has happened with some of the Nikons. And I think that some of the early Sonys also had it as well, where you can actually see the phase detect array over the top of your sensor, and it shows up in photos in particular situations.
Yeah, true.
So I think it's like a band or something like that comes through your photos. So you don't have to worry about that. So talking about the autofocus for photography, I was actually amazed how good it was. I tried all the different settings. I think there's like 8 different autofocus settings that you can use, ranging all the way from spot to area kind of autofocuses to tracking autofocus. And then lastly, the one that I used for most of the day was the face detect and eye detect autofocus.
And animal detect was in there as well.
And animal's the extra bonus that we had there, and we tested that one as well.
With me in the background, and it thought I was a little animal.
It must have thought you were a chimpanzee or something, because you were crouched going in the back of the frame, and it was like, that's an animal. We'll put a box around that as well. So I shot most of the day in continuous autofocus with face detect turned on, and it worked really good. So I did a few shots where I was just doing single shot, and then I do a lot of bursts as well, where I'm basically just machine gunning it, holding the shutter down, and just moving the camera around and letting the autofocus make sure that it's fine. So a lot of the time with how I shoot with the Sony is in continuous autofocus with eye detect, and I just move the person around the frame and get the composition how I want it, and not worry about the autofocus, because the A7 III's autofocus is really good. So I did the same with the Panasonic, and I was getting really good results with that. So I think in one tracking sequence, I think I did probably about 50 photos, and none of them were out of focus. And that's as she's walking towards me. Yeah. And that's in the high burst rate as well.
Yeah. So for video, I only use 2 types of focusing. Obviously, manual focus and the tracking focus were the only 2 I use. I was kind of told originally to use the face detect, which is what you were using, but I had a lot of issues with that for video. But the tracking one reminded me a lot of how the 1DX Mark II works, and that's what I'm used to. So I got some really good results with that. And then obviously going to manual focus is how most videographers kind of learn with whatever camera you start with. You always kind of just start with manual focusing. So I was really comfortable with that once we changed some settings.
So there was a setting that can cut you out here.
And with the Panasonic, the way we got given it, I don't know if it's how it comes out the box, but the way we were given it, there's a lot of stuff we had to change. And the first thing that I wanted to change was the focusing. So obviously electronic lenses, there's exponential or like non-linear focusing. So the quicker you spin the focus ring, the further distance it changes, and the slower you do it, the slower. So you could move the same distance physically, but depending on your speed, it changes how far the focus throw is. So you just change it back to linear, and you're good to go as if it was a normal lens. So it just brings that focus back to being a 1-to-1. So as much as you turn it is as much as and
it's going to focus.
And then that's how you can practice your rack focuses and nail it. So you can go, I'm racking from here to here, and then you can nail it in a couple of times. Then obviously just with the tracking autofocus, it's like the 1DX. So say if I clicked on Brit, like the model we shot with, if I clicked on her and I wanted to push in as if it was like a glide cam in or a slider in, she would stay in focus the whole time. Also with tracking, you could click on the background and then click on Brit, and it would rack focus between them for you. Stuff I used all the time on the 1DX Mark II, and it worked the same. And I didn't really have much issues with them. obviously most of the clips in the film, it's pretty tack sharp. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, so I think there was some questions about like how were you focusing it.
Yeah.
And I think a few people were actually surprised that you were AFing it.
Yeah. Well, that's the slogan for the camera. They've got two. It's sick as fuck, as in S1 CK AF autofocus.
Yeah.
So depending what way you read it, it could be sick as fuck or it could be
Just
S1 CK autofocus. Yeah. And the other one is full frame without compromise.
And I think they pretty well nailed it, to be
Yeah.
honest. It sounds like just one of those marketing slogans that's just made in a back room somewhere.
For sure.
But I think that it's pretty much
The only compromise for the video is the 1.5 crop in 4K 60. That's the only compromise that I can see. But I mean, what other cameras do 4K 60 in full frame?
Yeah, and I think that the only compromise on the photo side for me was the fact that it doesn't have a phase detect system array in there. If you are so hardcore into how your Sonys work, that kind of thing, you will find it to be something different. I wouldn't say that it's a major negative. I'd just say it's different.
Yeah, I mean, we backlight most of our kind of shoots. That's kind of our signature look. We mix it up a lot, but I really dig the backlight look. And even backlit, the tracking worked fine. I'm sure you felt the same with photos.
Yeah. So like I said, I did quite a few continuous bursts, moving her around the frame. It just kept that box on her face with the little crosshair showing me which eye it was focusing on, that kind of thing. I had one problem with the autofocus through the day, and it was when it was putting a box around Brittany, but still focusing on a palm tree behind her and would not snap off that palm tree for whatever reason. So I had to take it out of face detect and put it onto point. And then it worked fine after that. So
yeah, just keep in mind, we were on firmware 1.0. Like a lot of these could just be bugs fixed with new updates and new software. I'm going to get up some YouTube comments of what people wanted to know in the comments. Yeah. And we can go through some of those. A lot of it is video related. Obviously, it's the video. Did you get any on some photos that you have to talk about?
My main questions was just about how does the camera handle itself, and some questions about its size, because on my social media, I did post a side-by-side of it.
Next to the Sony, I'll put this photo up.
Yeah, with the Sony itself, which people were surprised just how big it is.
Yeah, I've got a question here about the size. I'll just...
so the actual camera itself is made out of magnesium alloy, like most pro level bodies. It is water. It's all environmentally sealed, operable down to minus 10 degrees. I think they list it as. It weighs a kilogram, so it's 1,023
it's basically
grams.
Like, imagine picking up a 5D3. It's got the same kind of build, same grip. It's a bit beefy, it's a bit heavy. It feels solid, like it feels like professional. It feels like
I kind of feel like the EOS R was a halfway step in between what we've seen this, and the Panasonic is the next step. So with the A7 III or all of the A7 range, you've got a really small petite
same with the
camera.
Fuji. It kind of is almost
the Fuji of course being smaller with the crop, and then you had the EOS R, which was kind of like a shrunken version of a normal Canon that you'd imagine, and the Panasonic has not bothered trying to be small at all.
They're like, we got big chunky lenses.
Yeah, you look at that 50mm 1.4, you know you're dealing with a big boy.
She's thick.
So I think it's a great thing, because whenever I shoot my A7 a lot and I go back to playing with my 5D Mark II, I'm like, it feels like home. It feels like coming home again. Just having the big bulky camera. I might not love the actual weight of the thing, but I love just the size of it. Really works well for me. So just talking about that, the size, it is big. Do not expect this to be something that is pocketable. Don't expect this to be a very great camera for travel like a Fuji might be, or a Sony.
I mean, don't get us wrong. It is, imagine taking a 5D3 for travel. Like it's still good. It's not like a Red or anything crazy, and with the battery life being so good,
I think the one thing that people get into their heads is that it's mirrorless, it's got to be small, and I think that's where Panasonic has gone, no, actually we're going mirrorless, but we're not going to compromise anything for making this mirrorless.
That's full frame without compromise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did you get any questions?
Yeah, so
to run through?
the other kind of things were the ibis. People wanted to know about. Someone asked if that whole video was handheld, and it was.
Yeah.
You know, you got the two axes on the lens, the 5 on the sensor. Nuts. Oh, what else we got? How big and how heavy is it? That's what we've talked about.
Yeah.
Any idea on the release date, which should be next week?
I think DigiDirect still has April listed as the release date, and it's 3,500.
Yeah.
Body only for the S1.
Yeah. Did we add any grain to the video in post, which we experimented with? We had a look at Film Convert and decided against it. We just wanted the clean image because show what the camera actually looks like straight out the camera. I didn't want to stylize it too much.
Yeah.
Obviously, just with the quick LUT over the top.
Yeah, even with the sample images that we're going to show from the photo side, my preset usually has a lot of grain in it to get that Fuji Pro 400 look, but I've taken it out so you can actually, even though it's colorized in my style, as far as the noise is concerned and the sharpness, you're still getting what's come out of the camera itself. So
what we actually did though with the profile was, I think we touched on this before, we turned sharpness down and noise reduction down. So it's as if it's the clean image out of the thing. No post-production in camera with the sharpening and that kind of thing. Yeah. Because for video, at least, I like to add that back in post. So in Premiere, I actually cranked up to like 33 on the sharpening in post before I rendered. Obviously, render settings, I just used the YouTube preset at 4K, which is like 44 on both of the menus, the target bitrate and the minimum bitrate, or maximum bitrate, actually. 44. I just saved that out and uploaded it. Yeah. Cool. Some other people were talking about like the color space, like it's 8-bit, it's 420. When the Vlog pack comes out, I think it's an additional purchase. I think you have to buy it like you did with the GH4, but basically it's coming with 10-bit, so you'll be
10-bit 422, right?
Not too sure, but it'll have 10-bit. But I think only in the Vlog profile, which is something I don't really use too much. I think it was 10-bit 420 internally, but externally could do 422. Okay. Yeah. But I'm sure that'll be on a tech sheet somewhere. Cool. Yeah, we're more of a kind of, I like nerding out to tech specs, but I am more of a creative in-camera person. And
well, I guess that comes down to when we're trying to decide, well, we're not really trying to decide. We change systems, like we change our underwear sometimes around here.
So never we don't wear anything.
But we're trying to find the perfect camera, right? So there's a few things that are important to each of us for our respective fields. So for your in video, what would they be? Yeah. So obviously image quality is key. Number one. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously that's why the Red for me is, as much as I hate traveling with it and I hate the size and I hate how slow it is. Taking those batteries on the planes all the time. The end result for me is worth it. Otherwise, I would put up with a worse image and have all those better things. But I think image quality is definitely number one. And I'm very happy with the image quality that's come out of this. Obviously, the other contenders for a B cam for the Red is the X-T3. Right now, I'm kind of tossing up between the X-T3, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, or the Panasonic. And it's kind of just like whatever image quality can kind of keep up with the Red the most is probably what I go with. As well as, obviously, you want the camera to be usable. You want it to be easy. You want it to function how you want it. Obviously, shooting weddings, it needs to be reliable. Like, you can't rock up to a wedding and not know what you're doing or have the camera fail on you. And you have one day, and if you fuck it up, it's done. So reliability is another one for me, which is why the Red's so awesome. It's like the mag for that like the Red SSD costs more than a camera. Like you would, if something happened, you would send that into Red and they would rip it apart and try and find all the data off it or whatever. It's not some $20 SD card from JB Hi-Fi. So reliability, image quality, obviously some specs that I look for as slow-mo. Obviously, all of the shoots on my YouTube are slow-mo is killer. So 4K 60, the 180 frames, both of those are tick my boxes. The ibis is great. Something I didn't know I wanted, but once I used it,
I kind of need that in my life. And yeah, that's probably the main things for me. Obviously, the touch, like the tracking focus is another nice to have.
Yeah, and once we actually got that running reliably and perfectly, it was like a game changer.
Yeah.
You'd basically just touch on her face.
Yeah, and that's what I was used to from the
wherever you
1DX, which
wanted.
I was missing. Because with the Fuji, it's just kind of whatever's on the back in that box, and the Blackmagic doesn't even have it. So right now, the Panasonic's best spec-wise, and I feel like it's probably between the Panasonic and the Fuji, I feel like those colors are the nicest. The Blackmagic is kind of a lot of work to get the color nice, whereas with, straight out the camera, you saw the Panasonic was great.
Yeah, so as somebody that's a color fiend, I was really surprised how good the colors were out of the Panasonic. I've never thought about Panasonic in the photography sense because they only ever had micro four thirds cameras, and to me, that just didn't entice me at all.
I think the only thing is the skin tones I feel are a bit orange, but that's something you can definitely dial back in.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion. I think that all the big brands, they all go for their different variation of what they think.
So Canon's a
the skin
bit
tone
pink
is.
and a bit warmy pink. That's why for brides and for weddings, the Canon was amazing.
Yeah.
Panasonic,
And Sony still gets a lot of stick about being a little bit greenish,
Yeah.
a little bit sickly looking.
Yeah, and then Nikon's a little bit yellow.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their different color science. Like, I'm not saying Panasonic's is bad. I'm just saying
No,
people look a bit
not
tan, but everything else is spot on. Like all the greens I've loved. Everything.
the greens are super lush.
Yeah, the sky is nice and blue. It looks
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, I was really happy with what was coming straight out of the camera with minimal work at all.
Yeah.
It's just that little bit of stylizing that I like to do in my color, and that's what these final images are really. But if it really came to it and I was showing a client, I could happily show them the file straight off the camera.
Oh, well, could you though? Because that was another thing that we had issues with. The playback on that camera was so slow. It could just be the firmware, like we were saying before, but from hitting play to it loading up was 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and half the time it wouldn't even show up.
Yeah, so we were having an issue through the day where it was saying that there was no file format specified or something like that.
Yeah, it basically wasn't just displaying anything. The card was freshly formatted. There was no other file structures on there, and it just wouldn't show anything, even though the counter was still going down.
Yeah, so we were making sure that the counter was still going down. When we were actually taking the photos, we could see that it was saving them. The little red light was blinking, but every time we'd try and hit that play button to see what we'd taken.
Yeah.
It
But every
wouldn't
now
show
and then
us.
they would actually show up.
And by the afternoon, it was showing us the files fine. So we didn't know what was up there. And we did ask the Panasonic guy last night what he thought. And he thinks that it could possibly just be a card issue, a compatibility with the card issue, or a firmware thing.
Yeah,
that
so
they
we were
need to
rocking
look at.
the SanDisk 128 Extreme Pro. But yeah, I'm sure they'll figure it out. They were really good. We're talking to them about some issues. And it wasn't just us. Ashley, another photographer who was using it, said she's had that issue before.
And
as
she
well.
has the exact same SD card as well.
Yeah, and she was shooting the S1R, so I think they'll definitely fix that bug before it goes out. They made a note of it.
Yeah.
So before we went on that little tangent, we were talking about what kind of specs each of us were after, and I said what I wanted for the video. So if you want to touch on what you look for in the photos.
Okay, so for me, pretty similar again. So first of all is image quality. So if you don't have the image quality there, then it's already a non-starter. So
not keen for that you might have the slow-mo, but a little 360p.
I don't care if it's got the world's best autofocus and amazing lenses. If
you're 640 by 640.
Yeah, if it's images potato, then I don't want to know about it anyway. So yeah, so first for me would be image quality, which it got a big tick for me. It was super sharp, and I think I didn't know it at the time, but when I looked at it afterwards, it really made sense to me that it doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter, because the only time I've seen stuff that sharp straight off a camera has been off the Fujis, which have the same thing as well. The next thing for me would be, of course, autofocus, and the internet goes crazy about when things aren't right with autofocus. There's a million autofocus tests out there for every camera you can imagine. Everyone wants to know how's the autofocus. Again, the Panasonic, a tick for me with that. I didn't have many problems with the autofocus through the day. There was a few, we touched on that one example where it put a tracking box around Brittany, but didn't actually focus on her for whatever reason, decided to focus on the background. So autofocus for me is not an issue with this. So anybody that is thinking, oh, it doesn't have phase detect, it could never compete with a Sony as far as autofocus is concerned. For me, I had both cameras on my hip. I'd pull one up to my eye, put eye autofocus on both, and be able to shoot, and they're both getting 100%.
And you were shooting them side by side anyway, so we have some good tests of what the different colors look like.
Yeah, so we only had the 24-105 f4 lens, but we basically set it to the same settings
as the Sony,
that we had for the Sony. So for the Sony, we
50s. You were on the Sigma Art.
Yeah, I had a Sigma Art 51.4, so we put the 51.4 to f4, and then just framed up the shot exactly the same and shot them side by side. So we'll have those side by side photos for you guys to look at. So that's image quality, autofocus, and then the next one for me is more the actual camera itself. So I've definitely come across cameras where I love everything about them, but I hate how they feel, and I hate the menu system.
We had to set up quite a bit on the Panasonic. When we first got it, it wasn't set up quite right.
So the menu system on the Panasonic is a little bit alien to me, but I think after a while I was used to it. And it's one of those cameras, much like the Sony. The Sony gets a lot of stick for having a really shit menu system. But the great thing with both the Sony and the Panasonic is once you actually have them set up pretty good, you don't need to really dig into the menus anymore. I do find the Panasonic has a lot more buttons on it. So for me, it feels like a more grown up Fuji, where if I need to change to burst mode, I can just change a little. It's actually got a hardware control for that. If I want to change the ISO, I push the ISO button and turn the dial, much like my Canon film bodies have. So just general use, I actually really enjoyed using the camera.
Yeah. So some things we've changed in the menu that weren't right was obviously we've already talked about the focusing,
the linear focusing,
the lens. Some other things. Originally, when the camera came, the ISO button would actually go up a stop, like when you push it. So we had to change that to be like, no, we just want to use this button to change the ISO. So instead of pushing it and you'd go from like 320 to 640, it would go up, and you'd be like trying to close it and it would keep going up. And the same with the white balance. If you wanted to change the white balance, you'd push the button and it would go from like tungsten to daylight, and you're like, no, I want to just be able to select.
Every time you touch the button, it would cycle to the next setting along. And I don't know any photographer or videographer that would want that.
No, you just want to be able to push it and control
then change it.
So we had to change that. So you just hold in the ISO button and swipe through. But once it's set up, it's fine. I'm not sure how it comes out of the box, if that's how it is, but definitely change that. Some other things we changed. Eye dynamic you want to turn off. That's basically just like auto ISO in the shadows. It was something that I discovered back on the GH4 days. I shot a video when I was at uni, like without knowing really what I was doing. And I got it. We shot it like midday. And I was at like ISO 100, like super high shutter. Like it was midday and it was so noisy. And I was like, why? And then obviously eventually found eye dynamic, which is basically trying to increase the dynamic range. So it'll bring up the shadows to make you have better dynamic range. So basically it's shot at 3200 ISO in the shadows for that particular example.
So I think it's like highlight tone priority that Canons have. So it's like it's doing trickery in there to give you more dynamic range, but you actually sometimes lose more than you're gaining.
Turn that off. Obviously turn your noise reduction and your sharpening down in camera, because it's better to add that in post for video. What else did we change in the menu? There wasn't too much else.
No, just configuring that Q menu to have whatever settings we want to have at a touch of a button. So much like, your Canons have and Sony has as well with their quick menu, you have a Q menu. So you can put things that you change often just in a grid of 9, basically. So you can change things pretty quickly and easily. So from the photography side, I would put just like what metering mode it was using, whether or not I was shooting in a picture profile, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then once we had it set up, it was so easy just to pass it to each other. I'd shoot something, give it back to Josh. He would shoot something, and there's like on the front, you can even, we didn't go this in deep, but there's like a little switch you can just have different settings on. So say for video, if I was just doing purely video, I could have one for slow-mo and one for just 4K like real time, and I could just quickly go between them on the front.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, if we had the camera for longer, we'd set up one of the switch one to be camera settings and just purely whatever I want, and then we could have number 2 to be Sam's video settings, and every time you switch that, it's as if you've got a different camera, because everything can change.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So that's a really cool setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I talked about image quality, autofocus, how to use the ease of the use of the camera, and how easy things are change settings, that kind of thing. And then probably the other one for me, a big one, I've only learned it's been a big one for me since switching to the Sony, is the EVF and LCD. So it's no secret that the A7 III's EVF and LCD is rubbish, and it's strange to me because I saw all of the reviews leading up to buying the camera, and while people did say that the EVF and the LCD was a downgrade from the R and the S's, I never knew it was as bad as it was. So getting back to the Panasonic, amazing EVF, highest resolution EVF that's out there. It's not the biggest EVF that's out there, but it's the highest resolution. And the LCD is great. I can trust the LCD.
Yeah. The only issue we had with it was in playback. It was just slow.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not anything to do with the screen or the EVS, but playback, to look at it, it wouldn't display 1-to-1 pixel readout.
Yeah. So if you brought up an image that you'd just taken and you punch into 100%, you're not getting a 1-to-1 image on that back screen. You're actually getting a downsampled preview of the actual photo. So if you needed to check critical focus, you're not going to see eyelashes, that kind of thing, really fine details, because it actually samples the photo itself down to a different resolution.
Which, like on a different camera, you wouldn't get that.
So we held up I took the same photo on both of the cameras, the A7 III and the Panasonic, and then we both punched them into 100%, and the Sony actually shows 100%, like a 1-to-1 image, and you could see the detail. On the Panasonic, you're
like, wait, did I misfocus? Or like what? But then you bring it up on a computer, and
you bring it up on the computer, and you've nailed it, and it's perfect. So this is something that we used to see a lot in older cameras that didn't have the processing power to actually show a preview image 1-to-1. And I think the worst example I ever saw of that was the 5D Classic, where no matter what you did with that screen on the back, you're not getting an idea of how the photo looks or if it's even in focus. But that camera takes beautiful photos regardless. So the EVF is beautiful on the S1. The LCD is great. Having that tilt vary screen, so you can do some strange angles, whatever you want to do there. But yeah, the biggest take out of it for me is that it is definitely many levels above what Sony's offering on the A7 III. You know the story about my A7 III, how at first we actually thought it was broken. It went back to Sony Japan. They did a calibration on the screen, the LCD screen on the back, and sent it back to me and said that it's in calibration. It was actually had the same issue once it got back. So
basically it was like almost a yellow tint to all the whites.
Yeah, so I can't display colors properly. I do not trust that camera. It's actually embarrassing when I shoot with clients to show them the back screen, because they actually think that something
didn't take it right.
Something's wrong with your camera, and I'm like, don't worry, look through the EVF and you'll get a better representation of what the colors actually look like. But still not great. So yeah, for me, they're the big things, and as I said, the S1 ticks everything for me.
I think for photo and video, it is pretty nuts. Like, I'm so stoked on it for video. I honestly think it's a good B cam for Red. Someone even commented on the video saying it looks like Red, and
I saw that. I thought that was pretty cool.
So I think it would be a good B cam for the Red. Obviously for weddings, I think it's the perfect wedding camera. Stuff that the Red doesn't have is the ibis. Obviously, it's so much quicker. The Panasonic than the red is. So much easier to maneuver around.
Yeah.
Which is something I'm not used to.
Yeah.
What about for photos? What do you...
For me,
your final thoughts.
The main things is going to be because I have Sony, but I still shoot a lot. 90% of the time I'm shooting on Sony, I'm using Canon lenses. So I have all my favorite L glass lenses. So I'm using the MC11. So I'm hoping to see EF to SL adapter.
For me, it's not so much a big issue because all of my lenses are those old Zeiss contact lenses that you helped me find.
Yeah.
So for me, I just need a dumb adapter that goes from Canon. For definitely, obviously, autofocus. It has the amazing autofocus features. You don't want to just disregard that. And
yeah, I'd like to see how it translates via an adapter.
Yeah.
That autofocus system.
They were saying in the event last night at the launch, they were saying that the Sigma one is basically as if it was properly mounted.
Yeah. So,
but if you put like a Canon on, it's a bit slower.
Yeah, so the thing for me is if the adapter comes out and it's not great, my next favorite lenses that I have are all my art lenses anyway. So I'll just get the SL mount versions of those lenses that I love, or I'll get my ones converted. So all my Sigma Arts, there's a service out there that will convert the mounts. So yeah, get them converted over. And
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, I have no roadblocks to getting the Panasonic, put it that way. I've been looking for the alternative to shooting the Sony just because I've been a little bit disenchanted with how the camera handles that kind of thing, and that whole sending it all the way back to Japan and getting the same camera back and basically being told that, no, the screen is just bad, you have to deal with it. That was a pretty...
Customer service.
Pretty bad from customer service there. Yeah, so
I think we're both pretty happy with the results we got. So I guess probably from here, the only other thing is some more questions for next week.
Yeah, so guys, in the comments below, hit us up with some questions.
I think we said at the start, we're probably going to try and do this weekly.
Yeah, don't hold us to ransom on that, but we will try and do this weekly.
Yeah. I mean, we just got this nice little setup.
Yeah, setup.
We kind of know what we're doing. Now, it took a little while to figure it out today. A lot of head scratching.
This podcast is 4 hours late, but you know, better late than never.
Exactly. We got to hustle it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you guys want to know anything, it can be related to photography, videography, business-wise, anything like that. If you guys want to know what we do, just comment it below. We'll definitely discuss it.
Yeah, even if you want to know what pair of shoes Sam's wearing in this video, that's fine.
Yeah.
Ask away.
Yeah, this is the shoe lord right here.
We have
on deck.
Anything can be asked.
Yeah. If you
but don't demonetize us with your questions.
If you need some little advice with the ladies, probably don't talk to either of us.
No. Terrible idea.
All right. Awesome, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.